XX Will Travel has partnered with Studio Headphones to offer our listeners a 15% discount off of any Studio product.
Just use the code WILLTRAVEL. Hi, and welcome to XX Will Travel. I'm Ines.
And I'm Kathy Pokerbeck.
And today I'm super excited about our guest because, first of all, she is super boss. Her name is Julie Hocheiser Ilkovich. So Julie is a career empowerment expert as well as a digital content marketing and social media specialist. She is also the host of the podcast Coffee Break with New York Wiki. And Julie honed her career expertise by navigating the corporate ladder at Warner Brothers, Hearst, and AOL, and is currently the managing partner and president of editorial operations at Masthead Media Company, which she co-founded. Julie's career advice can be heard regularly on SiriusXM's Wake Up with Taylor and has been featured in outlets including USA Today, Cosmopolitan, Women's Day, Crain's New York, Good Day New York, and a bunch of other places. She is a graduate of the Boston University College of Communication, a proud recipient of a New York Women in Communications Wiki Award, and she also used to be my neighbor and childhood friend. Yay!
Most importantly, I think, is that I am your neighbor and childhood friend.
Excited to talk to her today because Julie lived us for 6 weeks in Belize, and I went to Belize earlier in the year and absolutely loved it. And we thought it would be a great way to talk about this country that we both enjoy and just ask her about her experience of packing up her things and being there for 6 weeks.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll start with the question that you probably get the most often. Why?
It's a great question. And I remember, especially when I got back and had posted pictures, so many people from across my life kind of reached out to me with that question because we are type A New Yorkers, career-driven, and we just picked up and went to Belize for 6 weeks. Many reasons. So most of it was timing, I would say. We love to travel. We travel a lot. You know, when we were thinking about settling down a little bit more, my husband Daniel and I, which is the we were thinking about settling down a little more and starting a family. We were like, okay, we want to have, this great experience of an extended trip. The timing was really great and lucky. So we weren't both working for ourselves, but we both had flexible jobs. I run a company, so I do have some flexibility, but as many people know who are entrepreneurs, even with the flexibility, you're working all the time. So it's not necessarily easy to pick up and leave. But it was just really like all of a sudden we had a moment where my husband was in a role where he could be working remotely. I could work remotely. We had an insanely busy year. We went to Belize kind of in November and December, and it was just, we needed a break, as many of us do. So through a lot of thinking and working and planning, we were able to make it happen. But really, it was kind of a magic potion of timing and flexibility and planning and a love for travel.
Did you guys think of other places before settling in on Belize, or was Belize always your goal?
Now it's the most dear place to my heart, and we'll obviously talk more about that, and I love it so much and think it's like everyone should go there, happiest place on earth. But at the time, we were not focused on Belize. So essentially, we knew we wanted to do this. We had this kind of timing. We knew we could take these 6 weeks and go somewhere. We thought about going to Europe and maybe like staying in one place because we had traveled in Europe. We really wanted the experience of like going to France, but not going to Paris, maybe going to the French countryside and living there for 6 weeks. We really wanted to go and live somewhere, but we were nervous about the language barriers of a lot of places. So that's kind of what made the final decision for us, honestly, was it was the end of the year. So it was cold here in New York. So we wanted to go somewhere warm. And that was one thing that really helped get, Belize on the short list. And then as we thought about it, we're like, because we only had 6 weeks, which sounds like a long time, but we're like, we don't want a huge transition period. We don't want to be worried about learning the language or refreshing our language of the small bits of other languages that we have. And, Belize, the official language they speak is English, although they speak lots of languages. So that was kind of how we landed on it. It's funny, my brother-in-law actually was the one who gave us the idea because as he was going through some transitions, he was like, I want to go live in Belize. Honestly, I never even thought of it. And we were like, why? And once we looked into it and learned more about it, we're like, we want to go live in Belize. So we ended up taking that idea and going, and they didn't end up going to living in Belize, but they did come and visit us for Thanksgiving. So everyone kind of got their Belize wish, but it was some place we kind of discovered. It was not necessarily our lifelong dream to go to Belize, but we're so happy that we did.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Belize flies under the radar. I know when Ines mentioned that she was going to Belize, I was like, and I'm pretty well traveled. I was like, I've never even thought about Belize.
Yes, it's so true. And like, it's since then, I think it's become a little bit more popular, and people are always asking me, and I have this email that I've written, which I would be happy to share with anyone, about where to go and what to do because we spent so much time there. Another thing that wasn't necessarily a factor, but it's so close. Like, it's so close to a lot of major U.S. airports. So we flew through Atlanta, and it's like a 2-hour flight from Atlanta. I think you can fly there in like an hour and a half from Miami. So that was another thing that we're like, wait, why don't people go here? But I completely agree. Like, I don't meet that many people who have been there, and it's such a wonderful, wonderful place.
For me, the decision was really based on what you just mentioned. I didn't want to spend hours and hours on a plane, and I'm just a beach bum. So I was literally looking at a map and seeing, what country have I not been to that I can get to quickly? And I'm like, Belize. Yeah.
It's the best. It is so good. I mean, that's a good reason to go as any, because it's so close.
Before I started even planning my trip, it wasn't something that was, on top of mind or even, as you mentioned, a lifelong dream. But I think for that reason, it surprised me even more once I did land there.
Now I see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Did you love it so much, though? Did you have the time of your life?
Despite the fact that the weather did not cooperate, I have like the worst luck with weather on any trip. Like, I was chased by a hurricane in Costa Rica. The one time I went to Israel, there was some sort of cold, like, snap going into the desert. I'm kind of used to it, but even with, like, the kind of rainy weather, we did have days full of sunshine, and even the gloomy weather made it beautiful, and we had fun. Like, I went with a friend, so that's the we. I think there's a lot to say about a tropical location where even when you get bad weather, you still think it was one of the best trips you've ever had.
One thing about it also that was not the influencing factor, but it wasn't, extremely expensive. You can have a very cheap, vacation there, or you could have a very nice vacation there for not a ridiculous sum of money. And the weirdest discovery for us, especially, so we spent 5 of our weeks on Cay Caulker, and like, it's the tiniest island. There's no cars. You walk everywhere. It's such an incredible experience. But the food was amazing. And they had all this like international cuisine. And that was something that was very surprising. Like, if you go to a tropical location, like, you may be stuck on a resort and not necessarily getting to eat the local food. And it just wasn't like that there. And it was quite inexpensive to eat. So it was incredible as well.
Yeah, I definitely want to touch on the food later because I agree with you and I found so many great places. But before we get to that, so like once you guys made the decision, I mean, how did you plan for this move? How did you set up your life there? How did you leave your life in New York behind?
It took a lot of planning, and I'm a huge planner, but it was nothing that I had really ever, kind of embarked on before. So one thing that we've gotten into, which I think was really fun as travelers, like when we're planning a trip, we started to make the planning like an actual experience as well. So it didn't feel as stressful or overwhelming because with our work schedules and everything, as we were planning this, every day kind of felt like, oh, we should pay attention to that. We should pay attention to that. So we ended up doing like dates to go plan. So we would like go to a diner or a restaurant and just sit with our laptops for hours and hours and just plan the actual trip and book everything, which ended up being really fun. That was kind of how we planned. Also making sure everything was taken care of back here. So we both pretty much worked remotely from there, although my husband had a little more flexibility. So I was going to work from there. So that was one thing that's, when you're going to this trip, like what's the Wi-Fi situation? How am I actually going to work? What's my schedule going to be? We have 2 cats back in Brooklyn. So we had to set up everything for them. So, that was a lot of details. Like we ended up having someone live in our apartment, someone we knew, because we can't really rent it out with the pets there. So we had someone we knew live in our apartment. That made it easy. And then we just did these, long planning sessions of sitting down, looking at things, it was almost 2 trips because we spent the first week in the Cayo District, and that was a vacation, staying at a hotel and doing all the different experiences. And then we knew we wanted to live somewhere, so we chose Cay Caulker. So then that was a different planning of like renting a place, and that was all done, through Airbnb and VRBO. So the planning was hard, but it was really just about staying organized. And I think letting it happen in chunks really helped. So it didn't feel like it was something that was hanging over our heads as we were kind of living our lives here in New York.
So what was your daily life like in Cay Caulker, and how did it live up to your expectations? How did it challenge you?
It was beyond our expectations. It was so great. The funny thing is, like, we planned and we're very organized, but when we got on the place and we were kind of both looked at each other and we're like, what are we doing? Really, we're like, we kind of knew, but the momentum was going. We're like, how are we leaving our lives? Like I said, we're both really like career driven, and just was very not us. We didn't even know kind of what to expect. It was, I think, in terms of a place to go and live, it was just such a good decision because there are a lot of rentals that we could stay at for a long time. So we ended up renting 2 different houses for our time there just to have different experiences. But each one we stayed at for a few weeks. It just really helped us to have a place that we were like settled in. They had kitchens, they were full houses. Like I said, I was working. So I think the 2 biggest challenges for me was, one, Wi-Fi wasn't awesome, but I made it work. It was fine for like emailing and stuff. So actually, from what I understood from my clients and my business partner, it didn't really seem like I had left. I did take some time off, but just like regular vacation, not 6 weeks. So that was good, but it was really hard to like do a call or anything because the Wi-Fi wasn't great. So even Skyping, so I only had like a few calls while I was there, which ended up being okay. But the scheduling was really key. But the people were so friendly. We made real friends. We had people to hang out with. And like I said, the food was delicious. We got a little bit into a daily routine that was so different from our lives in New York. We had time every morning to cook breakfast and every evening to cook dinner. And I worked during the day. And at the my lunch break, we would just go and swim or try a new restaurant. So it was a very relaxed life, even though I was still working my New York job, which I think was really a unique experience, and kind of I had to get in front of it a little, but it worked out really well.
Were you tempted to keep it that way?
Yes, we were so sad to leave. I mean, we ended up coming back for various reasons right before the holidays, which on one hand was nice because we transitioned back to life in New York kind of over the break, and then went back to work in the new year. But we wanted to stay for a long time. When we were there towards the end, we were like, we wish we had planned more than 6 weeks. Because once we got into it, it was like we were in it. It was working out great. But I think we were just nervous about what it would be like. And so more than 6 weeks seemed unrealistic. But yes, it was hard to, and there were some habits that I have kept to this day there, which has been nice. So it really was like a nice little refresh and recharge and like a reset, which has kind of, Belize lives in our hearts still to this day.
What were some of those habits that you've taken with you?
It's interesting that some of them were so random. Like, one thing I learned about Belize, and I don't know what your experience there was like, but they're just so conscious and friendly to the environment. They have like a terrible trash issue in that literally our trash from New York, which is often just thrown into the ocean and washes up on their shores because of the location. And so I just became very, very aware of that. I became much more environmentally conscious. Even small things, like when we were there, I went from like using 1 billion paper towels, which I don't think about, to like using reusable dish towels for everything. Just like small little habits that they're so tiny and sometimes silly, but like in my day-to-day life here, they kind of remind me of our time in Belize. And so it's really interesting. It's also, we talk all the time about going back, and I hope we can. But even there, like from what I have seen, things have changed so much, and the tourism's constantly changing. So I hope we can make it back, because we have such fond memories of it.
I was very impressed by how aware they were of the environment and how they were trying to preserve it. Yeah, we went snorkeling one day and we used ragamuffin tours, which does not use, speedboats. They only use sailboats. Plates, cups, everything is reusable, rewashable, etc. Yeah, like they don't treat the animals because it used to be a practice before. Boat tours would feed certain animals so that the animals would come up to the boats and the tourists would be happy seeing them, but there's a lot of like damage that can be done that way, so they make it a point to not do that. But yeah, it was something that definitely, I don't know if I said necessarily surprising, but I didn't realize that they were that into like preserving their own environment kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I felt the same way. I learned so much. And another thing I learned so much about, I think, being there for an extended period of time is like learning more about the tourism industry, which is so important to so many countries, in a lot of places where tourism is like key to their economy. We befriended a lot of people who live there, and even on Cay Caulker, people move there from all over the world. And it was really interesting. Like a lot of people move there to start restaurants, which is why I think there's such incredible food there. Retirees, a lot of people from Canada actually who retire and come. But one thing I thought was really, really interesting that I learned was like the importance of TripAdvisor. So like every day, one of our friends there owned a restaurant that has since closed, but every day he would check TripAdvisor because it was so key for him to be in the top 5 at least for when people came to the island to find that restaurant and go there. So, looking at the reviews, responding to the reviews, like day to day. I mean, I live in New York City and obviously tourism is huge here, but I am not that integrated into it. So to learn a little bit more about the industry and the importance it really is and what it means to be a tourist in a foreign land and what's important to them was really, really fascinating to learn as well.
Yeah. Everyone I went to made it a point to ask me, please, if you like us, review us on TripAdvisor. Yeah.
See, it's so funny. Like, and I think a lot of times when we travel, we're like, okay, I will if I can. But for them, it's like so key. I opened actually like this morning, I reopened TripAdvisor just to see like who was ranking top in the restaurants because I knew it was so important to them.
Yeah. And I think it's the only trip where I've actually returned and written reviews in TripAdvisor because that was how like adamant and enthusiastic they were about it that I was having a bit of a guilt trip if I didn't.
Yeah, me too. I know. I look back at my account, it's like mostly reviews for Belize or maybe exclusively reviews for restaurants in Belize.
A lot of people dream of doing what you did and going to a tropical location for a while. So what tips do you have to people who are considering doing an adventure similar to yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a challenge, and I definitely get asked this all the time, and I've asked this by, especially by friends who know this experience. Like, it is such a challenge with people's jobs to do something like that. So I know I'm so blessed that we had flexible jobs where we could make this happen, but one thing I often think about and talk about, and, especially in my space, working in the career advice space, careers are long and jobs are long and life is long. Is that depressing? I think that oftentimes, especially as the career space evolves and working remotely is so much more common and people, employers want to maintain people because people are moving much, much more than we used to. I do think it's very realistic to do this, and there's a bunch of different ways to do it. One, of course, is like if you're planning on leaving your job, doing this between jobs. And that just takes planning, budgeting, saving to have that money. I think a lot of time when we start a new job, employers are like very anxious for us to start. But from my experience, if you are like, I can't start for 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, they're most likely not going to not let you take the job in the end. So kind of planning this trip between jobs, planning extended leave is really probably the easiest way to do it. But I do think, and I've had this experience with people like trying to plan something like this, and maybe it's not 6 weeks, but planning some kind of remote working trip is not impossible if you really work together with your boss. And I know it's not possible for everyone, but even just talking through it, planning ahead, being available to work sometimes I think is really important. I just think the nature of our workspaces are changing. And again, I do think like your job would rather you not quit to do this, most likely, depending on where you work. And so I think these conversations can be more common than we think they are, and just not being scared to ask. I mean, the worst thing that happens is that they say no, but especially if you've been at a place for a while and they trust you, I do think it's possible. It just takes a lot of planning and, of course, budgeting. Those are kind of the keys.
So let's talk a little bit about the fun part of Belize.
Actually being there.
Yeah, actually being there. So yeah, give us your highlights of Cay Caulker, since that's where you spent most of your time. I mean, whether it's things to do, things to eat, things to see.
Before Cay Caulker, if it's okay if I talk a little bit about that, because we spent a week in the Cayo District, which I think is a very popular destination for people going to Belize. One thing about Belize is when you fly in, you fly into Belize City, and I think it's just not a great place. It's not necessarily that safe. It doesn't look that glamorous and tropical, and I would definitely recommend never staying there. And that was the recommendation of people who live in Belize as well. But so I think when you land sometimes, it's kind of like, wait, what did I get myself into? But then there are all these gorgeous places to visit. We went to the Cayo District. We didn't, and I don't know if you made it to like Placencia. We did not make it to Placencia, which is another part of Belize that's supposed to be absolutely beautiful.
I only went to San Ignacio and then Cay Caulker.
Okay.
But you know who did go to Placencia?
Who?
Flavor Flav on Flavor of Love.
Well, if I had known that, it's like, Kathy.
I know, I held out my best tip.
Yeah.
We really wanted to make it, and actually, if you have the time, and it's funny, because to say we didn't have the time, we didn't, but we had 6 weeks there. There's just so much to do. You can take a cruise, like a sailing cruise, like you were mentioning, from Cay Caulker to Placencia. I think it's like a 3-day cruise, and you camp overnight on the way, and you catch your own fish, and you eat it, and it sounded that like amazing. That sounds incredible. But yeah, we started in the Cayo District, which is about a 2-hour drive from Belize City, and actually, somewhere between Belize City and the Cayo District is the Belize Zoo. Like, I don't know if you went to the Belize Zoo.
No, I didn't have a chance, but it sounded great.
Oh my God, they have this incredible zoo, which sounds so random. And I was actually, when my family came to visit, I had my young nieces and nephews there. That was one thing that, kind of motivated that visit. But it's an incredible zoo. All the animals are in these huge natural habitats, so it doesn't feel like a sad zoo, and it's just gorgeous. So I highly recommend it. But the one kind of key activity that you do in the Cayo Districts are the ATM caves, and they are unbelievable. It's like nothing I ever experienced in my life. So there are these caves with water flowing through them, and you can do tubing through them. We did kind of a hike. It's a long hike through these caves, and you're hiking through water, and you see these incredible ruins. Like, there are all these ruins within the caves, and it's really like something I can't even explain, but I would definitely recommend them. You kind of swim underwater for a couple seconds into these caves where you're then standing in water up to your waist and sometimes up to your neck, and you do this hike. So that's a kind of a must-see for me. Lots of Mayan ruins also. We did a lot. We visited a lot of Mayan ruins, maybe too many. So I'd say you only need to maybe visit 1 or 2. We did a couple days of them. But that was kind of what we did in the Cayo District. And we stayed at this hotel, if I can make specific recommendations. It was called the Amber Sunset Jungle Resort. And it was a family-owned hotel with these kind of like small villas in the jungle. Every day they would cook these like interesting meals. They had theme days, and we just really loved it, and we loved going to this kind of family-owned resort. I mean, there's a lot of hotels to go to in that area, but that was my recommendation. And then we headed to Cay Caulker. So we chose Cay Caulker because it was this really interesting, like I said, island where there were no cars. You walk everywhere, and beautiful. It's interesting because on that island, and I don't know what your experience was, but like there's not really a beach there.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of jump off the island, like into the water.
That's like the best way to describe it. So it's like the island was actually split by a hurricane, split in two, which is so crazy. And there's an area called the Split, and it's where you hang out. And I don't know, when I was there, stuff was kind of closed, but I think they've maybe since revived it, that you could like buy a beer and just sit and literally jump into the water. Yeah, like you just jump from the island.
Yeah, and they've made the Split exactly kind of like the hangout party location. Like there's a bar there, I think, called the Lizard Lounge now. Yeah. But there's like 2 bars on the other side as well. And then within the Split, there's like an ice cream shop, and there's also like a random French breakfast place. But we spend a lot of time there. Yeah.
So So that also feel like it made it so unique where it's like not, I mean, if you go, so one thing we also did for a couple of day trips, and also I think to renew our visa, we had to do it. We went to Ambergris Key, which is a very close boat ride from Cay Caulker, and they think it's actually what Madonna is talking about in La Isla Bonita, that song. Last night I dreamt of San Pedro, which they think is so it's really, that is also a beautiful island. And that's more, I think, a little traditionally like what people think about of like a, Belize tropical vacation. There are huge resorts with big white beaches, and it's beautiful. And it was fun to visit, but I think Cay Caulker felt a little bit more unique. We rented houses on Cay Caulker, but there are a lot of hostels and you can do it fairly cheaply. I don't know where you stayed. What hotel did you stay at?
So we didn't stay in a hotel in Cay Caulker. Our reservation fell through. We were going to stay in some dingy hostel, which I think I just aged out of hostels. Like, we took one foot in it. They had lost our reservation. And even if they had it, I was going to tell my friend, like, there's no way we're staying here. I will pay for anything else. But we got a great Airbnb. And it was, I want to say, a little far off from the center of the town, but the island is so small that it didn't really become an inconvenience. I mean, it was maybe a 10-minute walk from the main strip, but the Airbnb was great. It was just like open floor, kind of cabana situation. Yeah, with two porches and a kitchen, a dining room table, and a big bed, and it was great.
Wow.
Yeah.
You each had your own porch.
We each had our own porch. And it also had like warmish showers, which were a luxury.
That's all you could ask for. Yeah, the Airbnb, I don't know how much you guys talk about on the show. Like, for me, Airbnb, that has changed so much about travel. And we rented houses, we had kitchens. One of our houses had a washing machine, which was incredible, luxury for a 6-week trip because we had a lot of, obviously, laundry at that point. There are a lot of hostels. There is a way to stay very cheaply. There is a nice hotel on the island called the Iguana Reef Inn, which is actually, like many things on that island, American owned, or a lot of things are Canadian owned. And that was a really, really nice hotel. It's kind of on the back of the island with a nice pool. It's a little bit more of like a luxury. I mean, resort isn't really the word, but a luxury hotel for a more traditional vacation vibe. Really cool owners that we kind of got to know a lot of the people working on the island. Some of the other places, we talked a little bit about the food. So, I mean, the food was like just so good. So there was like local cuisine, seafood, incredible seafood, very cheap Caribbean lobster, which is very different than what we think of lobster here, but very, very delicious.
How is it different?
It's a spiky lobster. It just looks different. I'm not sure it has as much meat, but to me, the meat tasted as tender and delicious. But it's kind of spiky and uglier, honestly. But it's so cheap to eat lobster there, and it tastes like lobster.
Oh.
Yeah, totally. I had some grilled lobster there, which was pretty amazing. I had a lot of fun times with that lobster.
It's so good. It's so good. People come from all over the world to open restaurants there, and it feels so weird that there's these really authentic, incredible, like international cuisine right on this tiny island, which is packed with restaurants. I mean, we also stayed off from the main strip, which I would definitely recommend. Like, a lot of the Airbnbs are kind of towards the back of the island, but you can walk everywhere, or, if you wanted to bike. But there's like incredible Italian cuisine. There's a restaurant called Il Pelicano. It's kind of it opened while we were there, and it's kind of a nice restaurant. I mean, fancy for the island. You can still wear flip-flops if you wanted. An Italian couple who, they were from Italy, and then they ended up moving to Canada and moved to Belize. They were kind of brought on by investors to start this restaurant. So it's this incredible, authentic Italian cuisine, but on this tiny, tiny island. There's also, I know, a crepe place that was opened by, a French couple, or a French woman, I think. And there's an incredible pasta place, like Pasta Picasso, which is maybe the best pasta I've ever eaten in my life. I don't know how you felt about it.
Oh my God. I was going to say, I need to pause and talk extensively about this place because I went back 3 times. Like with my friend, we went back twice, but she left a day early. And then on my last night in Belize, I went there for the third time. The guy pretty much knew my name, like, Signorina Ines, you know? And it's amazing. It's tiny. It's in a little corner. I think there's only maybe 3 tables, and it's done, you know, like shared tables. Their menu is really limited. They basically have a cheese plate, a salad, and then they have 2 choices of pasta. One is vegetarian, the other one is, you know, some sort of meat type sauce. And then they have dessert, and they have like a wine menu. It's only I think it's also a couple. The husband is kind of the front of the house. He seats everyone. The wife, I saw the wife, and I'm guessing either her mom or his mom, like in the kitchen working, and maybe like 2 Belizean waitresses who also helped out in the kitchen.
Well, you know when there's a nonna in the kitchen that it's going to be good.
Well, and the thing about this nonna, though, was just like, she was kind of quintessential Italian lady in the sense that she had her pearls on, she had her, like, little cashmere sweater on and her heels, and she was, like, cooking up a storm, though, in that kitchen. I was mesmerized, but honestly, like, the pasta was so fresh. I think it's been one of, like, my favorite, like, Italian restaurant experiences of my whole life, having lived in New York and Chicago and Buenos Aires. This is the restaurant that kind of stuck in my heart forever.
Wow.
So good. I'm so glad you got to experience it. Unfortunately, there's always a crowd, and we didn't end up really. I think we went there like towards the end of our trip, and I had many regrets because I was like, why weren't we going here once a week for 6 weeks? And it was really interesting because we ate so much, but we both lost a ton of weight because just the cuisine on the island, like what we were cooking for ourselves was mostly like beans and, you know, some protein, really fresh. I mean, the protein, like the chicken is like killed there, or we would go to a local fisherman. You can just go to the dock and they're a local fisherman, you buy the fish. So we came back very tan and fit, even though it was like 6 weeks of incredible indulgence.
Isn't it amazing how easy it is to come back tan and fit from when you're not eating processed American food?
I know. It's like so sad. We really tried to keep that up when we talk about habits that we took back. Like, we really tried to be like, okay, we're going to eat this, but we just, you know, you get back in your habits and you have your local restaurants and grocery stores. But it really was a lesson in like, oh my God, we eat such crap. Even if we're eating healthy here, we're eating such crap.
And I think a lot of it is about ingredients. Like, I went to Europe last month and lived on cheese, bread, chocolate, and beer, and came back 5 pounds lighter.
It's crazy. Yeah, every time I go to Peru, I lose like between 5 to 10 pounds, even though I'm eating up a storm. And I'm also like convinced that it has to do with some sort of difference between farming techniques there and farming techniques here. Like,
I don't know. I blame it on the hormones and everything. But
yes, I think you're so right. Like, it's just the food is different, and it's like just fresher, and our bodies like it more. And just a few more restaurants, if anyone's listening, you know, things have closed, unfortunately, since we've been there, but a few more places that we just adored. So there's a cafe called Caribbean Colors Art Cafe, also owned by an American, I think she's from Michigan, who spends half the year, I mean, you just meet such interesting people. Like, when you go to some place like this, and especially if you're spending a long time there, you're like, wait, why do we live our lives like this? Like, so many people just picked up and went, and this woman, like, I think she was from Michigan. She ended up buying a house in Mexico, and she split her time between Mexico and Belize, and went to, you know, own this cafe, and there's all this local art that's being sold there, and also just great breakfast food, and that's where I discovered the iced coffee with the ice cubes made of coffee, which changed my life. But we went there all the time. So good. There's a place called Maggie's Sunset Kitchen, which is just like a very local, a lot of the local restaurants are really simple, don't offer a ton of options, but, you know, are just kind of cooked. Everything is cooked really fresh, sometimes by the owner. So that's a great place with incredible views. And then, I don't know if you spent any time here, but one really just fun place on Cay Caulker is there's a sports bar called Barrier Reef. We would go to trivia, and there's lots of people, like locals go there, and tourists, and people who, you know, are kind of staying on long, medium-term vacations like us. And that was really, really a fun place to do. And there, you could get some American food there if you ever want it. So we actually did our Thanksgiving dinner there. They had a Thanksgiving where they cooked traditional Thanksgiving foods, but it was hilarious. It's a very small island. Like, in order to cook stuffing or bake stuffing for the huge crowd that was there, they said they went to like basically like everyone on the island, and they just like put stuffing in their ovens. So like everyone was cooking the stuffing for this Thanksgiving, which was really, really fun. There's a lot of really interesting places. I think we went to Wish Willie, which was just a guy like grilling lobster, like we said, super duper cheap, like for a few dollars, and fish, and it was just so delicious and fun. So that I think was something we did not expect when we were living in this small island. We thought we'd cook all of our meals, and we wanted to make sure we had a kitchen, and there ended up being incredible options right on the island, which was amazing.
I really liked, I don't know if you got to go to Chef Juan's place, because it's also just this like little storefront. The guy basically takes your order from outside his like kitchen window. But I had some of the best snapper of the whole trip there, and it was really delicious. And I loved the fried jack that they served in breakfasts. Yeah, so fried jacks were my thing.
Tell us what fried jacks are.
So fried jacks are basically these very airy fried dough that they usually serve for breakfast, but it's kind of like empty on the inside, like it's hollowed out so that they fill it with different things like eggs, beans, or whatever. But they're really fluffy and airy.
So is it like, I'm trying to picture this in my head, is it like an empanada, kind of?
But they're big. If you've ever had fried empanadas, but they're not as greasy, they're just really light and airy, and they're just huge. They're like the size of a croissant, I guess.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, they're like you make it almost into a sandwich. Like, it's almost like a donut croissant. It's hard to explain, but yeah, they're very, or like a popover maybe, like very fluffy.
Yeah, that might be a good way of describing it. Like a salty popover that you put stuff in.
Yeah, right, like savory. They're really good. Oh my God, they're delicious.
So we recently got the chance to check out Studio headphones. What did you think, Ines?
I like them. The ones I got were the Regent, which is their premium on-ear model, and they're super white and really cute, and the sound quality is great. How about you?
I also got the Regent in black because it's like my soul, and was super impressed that they didn't feel like they were squeezing my head.
And you can also plug it in, or you can use the Bluetooth on it. And one of the great things about Studio is that they provide free worldwide shipping, which is great because that means you can get their sleek, modern Scandinavian design anywhere.
The best part, besides the great sound quality, the comfort factor, the fashion factor, and the Scandinavian design, is that they are offering listeners of XX Will Travel a discount of 15%.
Just use the code WILLTRAVEL and get your own.
And visit them at studio.com.
If you're going to the mainland of Belize, just from a food perspective, because I was thinking about the chicken. So they have like incredibly fresh chicken there, and then also fish. So like I said, we would just go to a fisherman and buy the fish, and that was such a fun experience. And we learned to cook fish from the ocean, unlike how we get it here. In the Cayo District, there's a huge Mennonite community, like huge. And they raise a lot of the chicken that gets sent all over the country. So a lot of what you're eating, even if you're in Cay Caulker, is this chicken that's raised in the Cayo District. And they also have like really, I remember, incredible ice cream out there that they're making. So that's another whole other food experience if you're on the mainland.
Yeah, no, it was interesting to see the members of the Mennonite community because even though the women were wearing the long dresses, like you see them here, they were in all these tropical colors. They're like in turquoise and hot pink and orange.
Weird.
Yeah.
That's so true, right? It's like a hybrid. Well, and it's funny because that for me was such an interesting thing to learn about the men. You're like, when you're staying there and you go to the store and you see a huge Mennonite population, it's like, how did they end up here? And so there's really interesting stories I can't remember all the details, but they were, somehow, I think, persecuted somewhere, and they ended up in this area in Belize, and they have, this huge booming economy, and if you drive around that area, it's like very different looking houses, and how they build their own communities, and that's a really interesting area also, yeah, in the Cayo District, kind of near where we were staying.
Yeah, I went in San Ignacio, which is in the Cayo District too, or where like near the ATM caves are and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to the San Ignacio Farmers Market, the big one on Saturday, and the Mennonites also had all their stands there with like different cheeses and honeys and things of that nature. I was gonna say, I think one of the things I really loved about Cay Caulker, I was reminded of this when you mentioned how every oven or stove in the island was being used to make stuffing. It is a really quirky little island. I mean, we were there for so long, not as long as you guys, but we were there for like a good week, that you start to get to know people, and there's really odd characters that kind of populate the island, both from like a local and an expat perspective. I kept thinking this would be like a great location for some Netflix show. Just like life on the island. Because, like, some of the things we would see or the conversations we would have were just so, just so unique. Like, and I think I just love the fact that even though it's a very tourist area, like, the locals and the tourist community just seem very integrated. Like, I saw people hanging out with each other as opposed to there being this huge divide.
Totally. I mean, it's really interesting. Like, and yeah, there are so many characters and different personalities, and because a lot of people come there from all over the world and kind of set up shop. So yeah, so there'd be like a local, at one restaurant, like the chef would be a local guy from Belize, but he had like moved to Brooklyn and he'd lived there for 10 years. And so he knew everything about our neighborhood, but also everything about Belize. Or like, one of our actual good friends that we made there, he was a car dealer, like a luxury car dealer in Canada, and moved here to have that kind of the go slow Belize life and open a restaurant and introduced all of his mom's recipes from Malta into this restaurant. I mean, it is such an interesting place. And that is something we like. Like, I'm not sure, and I haven't done this a lot of places, like if you would be as warmly welcomed as essentially a tourist as we were. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, you're a tourist, like do this, or selling us things. People genuinely, took an interest in us, and we took an interest in them, and we were very accepted. And, one thing we didn't even talk about yet is scuba diving. So we also, I love to snorkel. We also there's amazing snorkeling out there. And I don't scuba, but my husband does. And he got really into it, even more into it while we were in Belize. And that was, that was a little bit influenced our trip there, although he really developed more of a passion for scuba while we were there. But, the Blue Hole is a very, very, very famous scuba destination in Belize. And it's, if you don't know about it, even just Googling it, looking at the Google images, it's unbelievable. It's this incredible scuba location. It's a giant sinkhole, I think, which is off the coast of Belize. And so one trip that you can do, it's a whole day, and it's extremely expensive, actually, but it's a trip of a lifetime, is to go to the Blue Hole and take one of these excursions. I don't scuba, but I went along on the trip, and I actually snorkeled around all the different locations. And even snorkeling, if you're not a scuba person, was an incredible experience. It's not for the faint of heart. The boat ride is very rocky, because you're going out on the open water, but it's really, really great. And that's a huge part of the economy there as well, is taking, these big excursions to the Blue Hole. It's unbelievable. It's really, really, really incredible. So that's good. And the scuba life in general, like that was another interesting community we met there as my husband got more and more integrated into that. So there's like a family on Belize. I think they're American. They might be Canadian. I think they're American, with young children who moved there to start a scuba shop, and they live there, and they have a beautiful house at the edge of the island, really different than any other house because it's kind of more of a Americanized house. But they have, they're raising their 3 children there. They run the scuba shop, all the scuba instructors. We've gone on to become like Facebook friends and kind of keep up with them. And that's a really, really interesting aspect of it. So if you're a scuba person or even a snorkel person, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, the snorkeling tour I took there was, I didn't go to the Blue Hole. We just went to the Coral Reef and to like Shark Alley and the other kind of surrounding areas in Cay Caulker. But that was amazing. Like the Coral Reef was beautiful. I got to see a sea turtle up close, and I almost died of cuteness.
Yeah.
I really wanted to hug it. Like, it was like right up to my face, and then I got like, I'm like, maybe I should start swimming away because I don't know if sea turtles are violent. Water was so clear, and the Swimming with sharks was super cool, and it wasn't scary at all. Yeah, they're not the jaw shark.
Is amazing too. Yeah, they have a ton of tours and they have good. It's really great. We also did a stand-up paddleboarding tour that was great. Like I've never done that. I've never even done that at all. But we did a tour with a guide and we went around to the different marshes and it was really awesome.
Yeah, makes me want to go.
Yeah.
I've gone from like Belize to like Belize.
Yeah.
The best. It's the best. It's really, really good. For us, we didn't know what to expect. And like I said, we're kind of like, wait, what are we doing as we took off? But it's such a unique place where we, it wasn't like any trip. And we love to travel. Like I said, we've been a lot of places and it was so unique. And it's like you get that incredible tropical vacation experience without having like the big you don't have to do the big resort trip. And I think that's really, really unique. And the people and the food, it's just the best.
Yeah, that's a huge selling point, the being able to navigate yourself without being tied to a resort. Because you can't do that in the Dominican. You can't do that in Jamaica.
It's so true. It really is like very, very unique. And if you want to, go to a big resort and get a tropical drink, like you can do that too. Just take a quick boat ride over to Amber Keys. It takes a little more planning, I would say. That would be the downside because you do have to kind of figure out everything yourself. But it's really easy and there's a ton of resources for Belize. Like that wasn't a challenge because there's a lot available.
Were you guys ready to go back home when the 6 weeks were over? No? Were you crying?
No, we were not ready to go back home. It was because our family came and visited us over Thanksgiving, so we got that. So we weren't even like desperate to go back to see our family because we had just seen them. We just loved it so much. We were so sad to leave. It was really hard, but we did feel, I will say, like the experience of taking that time, as much as at the time it felt like too short, we did feel well rested. We did feel recharged. When we came back, we were a little reset and able to like re-examine our lives and our careers. And we ended up, going on to have a beautiful daughter. So, which would be much harder to do that with. The one thing I would say would be concerned about Cay Caulker is there's not any medical care there at all. So there's a doctor on the island. I think they have a program where they send a doctor and they're there sometime. You have to go to the doctor before you go scuba diving. You have to get a physical check. So I know that there is a doctor there, but talking to people, like if you have a baby, so I think a lot of babies are born on the island with a midwife, but like one guy we met, when his wife went into labor, they then had to take like an hour plus boat ride to the main island to get to the hospital. So we thought about it. We're like, well, there were two things we thought about. While we were there was a small hotel for sale that you could basically have bought for the cost of like an apartment in New York City. So we really, at the time, it felt very serious. I don't know how serious we were. We really thought, we're like, should we just buy this and stay here? Is there like any reason not to do that? I wonder if it's still for sale. It was really cute little inn. So that was one thing. But we also were like, should we stay here and start our family? But the medical care concerned me a little bit about like having a baby.
Yeah, when you're talking to people about the midwife situation, you're pretty serious about contemplating new life choices.
Yeah. No, that was something that was mentioned to us. What was it? Oh, because we saw a very, 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 very drunk woman in her 40s from Rust Belt, New York, who was, let's just say, just kind of partying up a storm one night that we were there. And at some point, she just wandered off. And her friend didn't seem to really mind the fact that she wandered off. And someone mentioned, like, well, I hope she's okay because there is no medical care on the island.
Not that there's anything wrong with being a woman in your 40s and partying up a storm.
No, nothing. By the way, she was like, honestly, she's like my hashtag life goals as far as I'm concerned. I think she was going through some things, though. Like, she came crawling out of the bushes to yell, "I've been here 2 weeks. My husband's back at home. Ha, ha, ha." Drinking some moonshine. But yeah, that was something that I do remember.
Yeah, it's a concern for an extended stay, like to know, just or something to be aware of. It's also interesting because we met a lot of people who are traveling alone there. Like, I'm not sure if this is true. I can't really speak to it, but like for fact. But one thing I kind of felt was like, people from all over Europe who are kind of spending this time doing gap years or like more extended trip that are more common, I feel like, over there. Belize seemed to be a part of the destination, and I have met a lot of people since then who like go to Central America and South America and do stop at Belize. And there are a lot of people traveling there by themselves, which I actually thought it was because of the community and people are friendly. Like, it was a good place to travel by yourself because like we would be at the sports bar trivia night and people would just join our team. Like, it's a very warm place and kind of an easy place if you're going to do a solo travel.
Right.
And I felt pretty safe everywhere I went with I know Belize City is supposed to be slightly dangerous, but for the most part, everything seemed like it ran on time-ish. Like, people were friendly. Nothing was too complicated. And I love their whole little motto. Like, it was the Cay Caulker motto of go slow.
We lived by go slow. We really, it takes a while if you're coming from New York to like adjust to that life. And then it took a little bit. I remember so well. We came back and immediately we had my husband's holiday party, which is like in the meatpacking district in Manhattan. And I remember getting off the subway and just being like, what is my life? Like, oh my God, what is my life? Like, I really had to readjust. It's go slow is the motto of all things. So you go with the flow.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I started my year, and I swear, it's kind of followed me throughout the rest of the year. Every time I start to get frantic or in a panic, and I'm a little high-strung and impatient, I'm just like, go slow, Ines. Like, it will come. You know?
Yeah. It's a good life motto. I like it. It is really, really good. Yeah, and I think that helped us. Like, and just having that experience, although it was only 6 weeks, we're often able to remind ourselves of like, remember I was like in Belize, remember what those people didn't worry about, like, remember what's important. Like, actually, I remember, this is so funny. So we did this trivia night. We used to love it. It's so fun. I remember one of the questions, the answer was very clearly Jay-Z. I don't remember what the question was, but that was the answer. And people there didn't know who Jay-Z was, a few people. They weren't all natives, but there are people who lived there for a long time. And I was like, what is the world in which you don't know, like, who Jay-Z is? But then as I was there longer, I'm like, I want to live in that world. Like, they don't care. Like, they didn't care. They're just like, they don't care. They don't care about celebrity gossip, which I really am into. They don't care. And it was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, you can live such a happy life without having those as like your priority or even like using up any of your brain at all.
I was in France, and a friend who's lived there abroad for many years didn't know what vocal fry was. And I was like, come on, everybody knows what vocal fry is. It's been in the media for years. And he was like, not my media. And I'm like, good point.
Yeah, I'm jealous of that. It's like, what's in my brain? I used to work in magazines, so I come from a world where a lot of this stuff truly matters, like on a very professional level in terms of like pop culture and knowing this and that, and to go there and be like, oh, you all live a happy life without like caring about that or any of this. It's not even in your like world. It really was a little like, it sounds silly, but it was a little eye-opening to me, and very, it kind of shaped the way we looked at our lives and careers when we came back.
Well, any parting thoughts on Belize, Julie?
Belize is the best. Everyone should go there. It was really, really incredible. I'm like, I think that's everything. I had a whole list of things I wanted to make sure to share with you guys. I think was pretty much it, but it was, it was just, we had a great experience. And again, like, I know when I talk about this, I often feel people like almost rolling their eyes because it's like, oh, not everyone could do that. Like, but I do think there's ways in some shape or form to integrate more travel where you're really experiencing the country at the very least into your lives. And I encourage everyone to do that. And I encourage everyone to work with their, jobs if at all possible to figure out ways to kind of integrate trips like this where you're really like experiencing it and able to understand the country and learn about the different cultures. I mean, I think that's another thing, like when we're talking about staying at a resort versus this, like a real key difference is really like experiencing the world of which, you're in, which I think is not always easy to do when you travel.
I feel like not everyone could do this, but way more people could do this than they think they can. I think there's a lot of fear in asking.
Yeah.
That's like the best way to put it. 100% agree. 100% agree. And from the career expert in me, I'm always like, really, and this is a lot of stuff about careers, not just this, but it's like the worst thing that's going to happen is that they're going to say no for a lot of stuff, like asking for more money and all different elements of your career. But for this end, I think I agree. I think just asking or trying to work out something is really important. And I also think if you're an employer, like message to employers, being open-minded about those kinds of things. I know a lot more companies are starting to offer sabbaticals after a certain amount of time you stay at the job, because in the world in which we live, employee loyalty is not the thing that it used to be. You don't stay at a company for 25 years. Anything that you can do, I'm an employer, and anything I can do to make the people who work for me and with me happy is really key.
All right. Well, I guess that about wraps it up.
Yeah.
Thank you to Julie for sharing her story of Belize and all your enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love talking about travel. So anytime that you want to talk about anywhere that I've been, thank you so much for having me. I love this, and I love speaking to other women about our travel experiences.
So where can people find you, Julie?
So I speaking of career advice, I host a career podcast for New York women in communications. It's called Coffee Break with, but New York Wiki. And essentially what we do is in each episode, we talk to different women who are working in the world of communications about their career paths and their career advice. And we've talked to some really, really interesting people. To find the podcast most easily, we are available anywhere you download a podcast. We are on SoundCloud, but if you go to nywici.org/podcast, so nywiki.org/podcast, you can find all of our episodes and, find easy links to iTunes. And I'm also on Twitter @JulieInNYC, where I'm happy to give career advice and chat with people. I love it. So that's kind of where you can find me. And yeah, it's a different kind of women's podcast, but it's been really fun learning about the paths of different women. So I hope you guys enjoy it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Julie. It was so great talking to you again. And yeah, if you like this podcast, subscribe on iTunes, find us on SoundCloud, Stitcher.
No, we're not on SoundCloud.
We're not on SoundCloud. Podbean, Stitcher, other places that are not SoundCloud.
You can also like us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram @xxwilltravel, or on the old-fashioned internet at xxwilltravel.com. So until we see you again or speak with you again, go forth and travel.